What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and it's time for League of Legends patch 11.5. To the best of my knowledge, looking at the calendar and everything, this is going to be the playoff patch for the LCS. Keep in mind this weekend's games are never on the patch, so that'll be 11.4, but the last week of the regular season, and then throughout all the playoffs, because generally speaking, patches don't change during playoffs. 11.5 is our playoff patch for LCS. LEC may well be the same. I'm just not certain about that one. So 11.5 has lots of pro-facing nerfs as a result. Azir, Gragas, and Rel. Udyr because he's OP everywhere. Yep, sure. Support Shaco's been OP for most players. Seraphine really OP in high elo, especially as a bot laner, although this will hit support as well to a certain degree. Ramus overall high win rate, yeah, it makes sense. And then a bunch of buffs, right? And it's cool to see that there are technically more buffs than nerfs. Obviously, Samira is a follow-up off of the previous patch being too heavy. Some changes to Pyke and Twitch, which I think are both actually pretty good. And some item changes as well, which should be kind of interesting. So let's get into it. All right. So Azir is just doing 10 less damage through the W, through the auto attacks. So here's that data table. Again, it's a flat 10 damage difference as far as I can tell. So here's the numbers. Not anything hugely surprising. But one thing I did want to do, actually, which is going to be this stuff here, is I wanted to compare Azir to anyone else who might get up to like 150-something attack damage at level 18. And so I took Darius, and I said, okay, Darius, what is your base AD? And then what is Azir's soldier damage post-nerf? Because I was curious. I just like wanted to know what the comparison was like. And obviously, if it was pre-nerf, then it would be 60-64, which is, you know, much closer than 78%. But I took post-nerf, and what you can kind of see here is the scaling is a little bit slow. Like, in a sense, if you're going to compare to any other high attack damage champion, which Azir functionally is, right? He's a high attack damage ranged auto attacker. Through the W, and then you like build attack speed and ability power to keep that going. He actually troughs a little bit in the mid game compared to other similar champions. I mean, certainly it might be quite easy for Azir to just, you know, build a couple of amp tomes or whatever and make Lichbane happen. I think it's actually blasting one, but you know, sure, there's, you know, ways to scale up this damage, but it's not like, you know, a would-be Darius or a would-be Callisto or someone else isn't going to buy, you know, longswords or equivalent. So I'm not saying this is a bad thing in any way. I just think it's interesting that this sort of late game target of 150 attack damage is obviously not realistic, and that the last, you know, from 11 plus is plus 10 damage per level, which means really 1 through 10 only goes from 50 to 80. Whereas, you know, by comparison's point, right, you can see that, you know, Darius goes from 64 to 108, which is, you know, a bigger percentage drop on the Azir side. And again, because plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, up until level 7, you're really not getting a ton out of your early level scaling. Which I just find, you know, like it's interesting, right? It's worth noting. Now, other things worth noting is having 50 damage as your auto attack is on the very low side. Most marksmen have like 55 plus. Even a large number of mages have way more than 50 attack damage level 1. So this is a pretty big hit here. Not much to say other than, yeah, I mean, this is mostly an early game nerf. I mean, obviously the percentage is higher when 10 damage is a larger percentage of your damage output, but this really hurts Azir's lane bullying. Like this probably removes Azir from pro play. I know that seems kind of absurd, but so much of Azir's power is people who are good at Azir abuse the early Sand Soldiers to just be better at trading. Because it turns out your W autos have more range than someone else's basic auto attacks. And if they ever get an auto attack range, you walk backwards, they have minion aggro. Like, if you're good at Azir, they actually can't trade against you. You just win the lane automatically. So, at least as far as I can tell, from what I've seen watching pros play. So this is, the early focus nerf is a big deal. Realistically, wouldn't hate to see, you know, some mid-game power come back, or just, I know Riot has consistently tried to find ways to make Azir viable in solo queue without being busted in pro, and I mean every year or so they keep getting him closer to that mark where like Azir has not been in 45% win rate in solo queue for a really long time, which is, you know, good work by them. It just means there's a bit more to do because Azir's back. All right, next up is Gragas with barrel roll getting flattened mana cost, which means if you're ever going to max Q last, or, you know, well, I mean, no matter what, it's higher mana cost, right? So this is if you're maxing Q first, you still have way worse mana cost for the first 8 levels. That's going to be felt quite a bit. We know that some people will go tier on their first recall as Gragas to help supplement mana costs. That's probably going to be even more mandatory here, since unless you're going to go for Frozen Heart, which I probably don't recommend, you're not going to get any mana on a tank. So tier is even more sort of required here. This is a kind of a double whammy because obviously Gragas has to cast spells to get his passive off to get the regen. So if you can't cast as many spells, you can't get as much health back. So it's kind of a double whammy here. This is a fairly meaningful nerf. It is not gigantic. Like, if you wanted to play Gragas, you can still play Gragas. It's not that huge of a problem. But obviously, it does matter. The nerf is sort of more prevalent if you end up maxing it second. Like, if you're doing Body Slam first or Drunken Rage first, then, those take your points away. And so, you're still having a 20 mana cost difference. But, this shouldn't delete the champion. It just means that it's weird because pros are generally pretty fickle. They're either going to say that Gragas is not, still the number one tank, this wasn't enough, and Gragas is not moved in pro presence at all. Or they're like, yep, Gragas is dead, I'm just going to play Scion every game instead. It's kind of going to be one of those two things. And, we'll see the presence go down a moderate amount, but it's because each team has decided their own thing. CLG will decide that Gragas is not viable, and Golden Guardians will decide that Gragas is still the champion every game. But the presence will be cut by half because half the teams will be like, oh, he's trash now. So we'll see what happens there. Next up is Jax. Jacked up Jax packs the max attacks with Trinity. That's not really that hard, but I know it's 3 times fast, but I'm not willing to do it. So Jax is getting almost 1 full attack damage per level, which obviously looks pretty good. I would say that for a melee champion, that is... Here's the weird thing. So I thought about this before, and I still think I'm in the same boat as I was, which is... It doesn't make sense, but it does to me anyway. Attack damage scaling on melee champions is less important than it is on ranged champions. Now, what's weird about that is, it's not like you can use your attack damage in any other way than auto-attacking. Either Jax is a good auto-attacker or he's not, and, Jax is an auto-attacker as a champion. It's not like we're giving attack damage to, I don't know, Azir, who's going to use soldiers anyway. This is for Jax, who, literally wants to auto-attack you a whole bunch and buy a bunch of attack speed, like Trinity Force and sometimes even Rageblade. So, why shouldn't it matter? Which is the logical part of it. But at the same time, it's well, here's the thing, though. Most of Jax's auto-attacks are amplified by something else. Now, to be clear, Trinity Force, in fact, interacts with damage growth, right? It's percentage of your total AD, of your base AD specifically. So, this actually does interact with Trinity Force completely favorably. But, Blade of the Ruin King doesn't interact with your base attack damage. Yeah, okay, you want to auto-attack to apply it, and yes, it deals your AD, and yes, it gives you attack speed, so it, amps your auto-attacks, but you're doing 10% current health damage, and that doesn't care about your AD. And if you ever go for... let me think of the other obvious options. The little bit of if you did a Rageblade build, that Rageblade stuff would matter. Your R passive for the third hit, and your W active, and your E stun, and just the ability to be tanky, right? All those things. Caitlyn, if she doesn't auto attack, does literally nothing. If Jax doesn't auto attack more than twice, he still technically 3 times. Gets W, gets R, gets Q, gets E, gets all those things off. And yes, theoretically, Caitlyn has W auto and E auto, but it's not the same. Jax as a champion does more than auto attack to a greater degree than someone like Tristana or Caitlyn. That's the point I'm making here, and that was why I'm initially this buff doesn't mean as much as you might think because Jax is more than just a damage source. He is a medium light tank, and he is a source of crowd control, and that is why this is less meaningful than if this was this big of a buff on someone like Tristana. That's what I mean with that. But either way, Jax is getting a lot more attack damage. You can see 68 to 140. Where you saw Darius up there was 64 to 149. So Darius still has more total attack damage, which is fine. I don't think it's a problem in any way. I don't think consistency and raw attack damage is where you need consistency. I think it's actually correct for champions to feel very different. And it's look, Jax gets free attack speed, but maybe has a bit less total attack damage because, the W and the R are the exciting parts of the kit, so you can kind of siphon off power and make those feel better. On a similar boat, Darius has no attack speed anywhere in his kit anywhere, so his raw AD is really, really high, and he gets even more through his passive, and it's look, he just has really, really big, really slow strikes, and it makes you feel more like a juggernaut to have, attack speed down, AD up. Those are really good levers to make champions feel different because everyone auto attacks, but everyone auto attacks differently. And that's a really cool way to have changes. That's one place where I absolutely would not in any way hard push for consistency, but using mana is not that, right? auto-attacking is. Okay. Either way, yep, Jax, though, is getting a lot of attack damage. Again, up to 15 more AD at level 18, which is not the level you reach in every game, but, still, Jax does auto-attack some. This is going to affect his late game power. This means if you're, bring him up as a split pusher and leave him in a side lane to knock down turrets and structures, yep, that level 16 Jax, that's kind of pushing your base. 13 more attack damage per hit. 26 more damage per Trinity Force. That matters. So yeah, this is a pretty solid nominal buff to Jax. Next up is Karma, getting further buffs. She is still not quite there, so Riot's trying to buff her up to, I'm guessing, a slightly above 50% win rate champion. I think she's pretty much there, but once again, cooldown off the Q, basically. If you are correct in playing Karma, and this is actually not going to be quite correct, but I don't have a pre-built sort of table for this, but if you're maxing Q first, because the cooldown only goes from 9 to 7 anyway, it's not that different based on rank, so it's kind of still just 87-ish% at all ranks, basically. Though still, yep, meaningful cooldown buff. This is going to matter. This is, if top Karma wants to hard wave clear and shove waves, she can do so. Same for mid, obviously. If bot Karma wants to get even more poke off, that's obviously doable. Landing spells is how you get mantra back, so, also valuable. And then on the other side, if you're going to max it second, you're going to put all the points into shield. Now, the correct skill order is actually Q at 1, 3 or 4, and 5, and then wait, and then max it at 12, 13. But, I mean, whatever, right? It doesn't really matter either way. It's just kind of to show you, the basic differences. But, yeah, it kind of doesn't matter what order you max this in. The cooldown change is going to be, about 12% off kind of regardless. I guess last thing to say is, this still does incentivize maxing Q because, getting more damage and even lower cooldown, it just continually is a bigger DPS bump. Realistically, if Riot is ever scared about, top Karma being too good, you just flatten the cooldown at 7, which for pretty much the entire game is a support Karma buff. Maybe you could even cap it at 7.5 or something and just the put it there for the entire game, because top Karma is always going to max it all the way, right? And they're always going to go down to 6 by, they're going to go down to 6.5 by level 7, which is a reasonably early into the game. And support Karma, if she's good, is going to put 3 points in Q and stop. And then at level 12, which is really late for support Karma, go to 6.5, which means if you flattened at 7, you would have a support buff that is a lot stronger, and yeah, it would just be a straight support buff for basically the entire game. And as compared to top lane Karma, you'd have a lot of portions of the game where you're not getting this buff. You're getting a longer cooldown. So one thing that could be considered at some point in the line, if it was a problem, not saying it is one, but it's where I would look next if this was a problem. Okay, next up is Kog'Maw getting a 0.25% of the target's max health damage per rank. So it's 3 to 6 becomes 3 to 7. Obviously, Kog has total AD as well, and here we are. So, not as big as you might think, by the way. Realistically, going from 6% of someone's max health to 7% of someone's max health is a 16% damage bump. The W does 16%, or if you want to round 17% more damage. But even with, late game level 18 champions, and sure, this is not using a 16 stack Cho'Gath as our example target. It scales from here with max HP, with Juggernauts building raw health and tanks building raw health. It keeps moving, but end of the day, it is not as gigantic as you may think. The W is 17% stronger, but Kog's auto attack damage is only 8% stronger. Roughly speaking, half of Kog'Maw's damage is still in his auto attacks. Even with an on-hit build, his raw AD roughly matches the W on-hit damage. That's just the math. Again, the more health they have, the more it skews towards W. But also keep in mind, Kog's gonna build a Blade of the Ruin King, which has AD on it. And hey, on hit damage, it's not his W. And then he's going to build a Rage Blade or a Kraken Slayer. And those things make the W better, but they also provide damage that's not the W. So one, and I want to be clear about a couple of things here, right? So first of all, I'll take the very extreme, which is people like to consider Kog'Maw an anti-tank. And while to a certain degree it's true, most of Kog'Maw's damage does not care about your health total, right? Keep in mind things like everyone gets MR, so the Q's resist shred still affects squishies. And everyone gets a lot of armor, which also still very much affects squishies. But if you're trying to survive Kog'Maw damage, for example, and he's auto-attacking you, the only magic damage on hit he could even buy is Wits End, which is realistically not going to that build until, I mean, 4th or 5th, if at all. And probably not at all. Kraken Slayer's true damage, his basic auto attacks are physical damage. Kraken Slayer's raw AD is physical damage. Ginsu's Rage Blade is physical damage, right? Like, I said Bork, but repeating it, that's physical damage. So like, even though Cog has magic damage on a hit, like percent health thing, Tank should still buy armor against Kog'Maw because he can't scale the magic damage in any way. And I don't think it's even correct for him to go Lichbane. Ultimately, yeah, right? And in to a certain degree, because some of the discussion that we're seeing online is about, you know, multiple viable builds and whatnot, I actually think it's correct for Kog'Maw's AP ratio on his W to be somewhat depressed. Because otherwise AP Kog'Maw just uses the entire kit. And he's just, this is going to sound weird. AD Kog'Maw, right, has some AD scaling on the R, because I think the R should be viable for both builds. Like, outright. Sure, AP Kog'Maw gets more mana because you always go Saris, but like AD Cog can use the ult. The ult has some attack damage scaling. It makes sense. They can both use the Q nominally because at least the Q has a shred, but like for AP Cog, it's a nuke. AD Cog uses the E for a slow. AP Cog uses the E for a nuke. Like, those are really nice. Right? So they have, right, the ult's useful for both because it should be. The E and the Q have kind of distinct like uses for both builds. This might sound stupid, but I'm not sure it is. The only tool AD Cog has that's better is the W, right? AD Cog auto attacks better than AP Cog. If the AP ratio of the W were so high that the right way to build on hit Cog was Nashor's Tooth Death Cap, there was no longer a reason to play attack damage Kog'Maw. You've completely crushed the build. And that's why I bring up that I don't think the WAP ratio should ever be very good. Because you have literally no reason to play AD Cog anymore, if that's true. If the ratio is good enough where you just should build AP Kog'Maw, and I don't think that's ever the goal for Riot. I'm not sure how much they're looking at mythic win rates and really comparing. Anyway, they're not even doing anything about AP Kog'Maw regardless. Also worth pointing out, by the way, AP Cog does not max W until level, until 14 plus, so this does not buff AP Cog in any way. But AD Cog appears to be, AD Cog in bot lane appears to not be doing very well. So, again, still a meaningful buff, right? And the buff holds on throughout the game somewhat. Obviously, yes, the more attack damage you build, the more other stuff you build, the less this matters. But such is the case for any scaling you get. Pretty good buff though. This feels meaningful. Next up, Master Yi is getting some incentive to max E. 2 to 10 more damage on the active damage is pretty meaningful. It has a bonus AD ratio, so again, as builds go on, this means less and less over time. This is Master Yi's base attack damage plus E's damage. Put out into a data table here. I looked into it briefly to see if it was possible that E max Master Yi was right in the first place. When I looked at Plat plus solo queue with like a 2-ish% pick rate, E max Master Yi had a higher win rate. But I'm like, I'm not convinced that's good enough for me though. And so I looked at gold plus solo queue and it got washed back out. This is not to say that, if you're a better Master Yi, you should in fact E max. I don't think that's true. I wasn't willing to really look any further into it, but there is a small possibility. There is a possibility that you should max E first on Master Yi after this buff, because getting here 10 more true damage on hit is really meaningful. I forget if the cooldown on E scales. Obviously, like Q, you get more damage, you get more cooldown. It helps your jungle clear. Obviously, it's really, really relevant, but it wouldn't be that hard to do some basic analysis on, can you clear your jungle at level 5 faster with rank 3 E or rank 3 Q? I'm not saying you should change the build. Like with Mundo, you should max E first. Like that's just the build, people should learn it. Mundo is outstanding if you max E first. Go do that. That champion is giga strong. But actually, I'm not saying you should actually do this. I don't think it's true. But like, it's actually, I'm going to say sort of somewhat charitably, but I think somewhat fairly, it should be a real consideration. I think it's reasonably close at this point, which I think is cool. Like, I think that's a good thing. All right, next up, we've got Pyke And Pyke is getting pushed out of solos back into support even more. This is like the 5th changeless aimed at getting Pyke into support. As someone who has abused mid-Pyke, the champ is sometimes real dumb. Like, your wave clear sucks, but gosh, is your dueling absurd. If they don't have an escape for your E-stun, you take 80% of their health before level 6. And then at level 6, they flash your ult or they die. The champ is oftentimes very absurd. So apparently we're in another spot where Pyke is just too good in solos and not good elsewhere. So let's talk about it. Okay, so Pyke stores gray health, which he then regenerates as health back. So it used to be that he would regen somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 the damage taken. Sure, great. Now he only regens 10% of the damage taken in solo lanes, but 35% of the damage taken when 2 or more enemies are nearby. So if you are going to play solo lane Pyke, you get gray health in team fights. And if there's a 2-on-2 gank or any kind of a skirmish, you're getting full gray health value so that you can sustain back up and, dip out of the fight. But if you're just laning against Fizz or laning against Talon, you're not getting it, right? That's just going to happen to you. Now, I will say, this will probably map hack for you. I don't see why it wouldn't. That would be really troll if it didn't map hack for you. So if you're able to kind of track how much damage you're taking and realize, wait a second, I'm not taking 10%, I'm taking 35%, the jungler's nearby. And that's a little interesting, right? Like, it does feel weird getting passive map hacks. So, I don't absolutely love this, but there's also so many levers out there that I don't hate it. Like, I'm still overall, like, as though my opinion matters, like, design-wise positive on the change, but it's certainly going to do the thing of making support Pyke better and mid lane Pyke worse. Like, there's no debate that mid lane Pyke is going to be weaker. Anyway, scaling off lethality. What I believe this is trying to say is you have 100 lethality, it's 25% more. So this becomes 35% damage taken at 100 lethality. Now, 100 lethality is basically not achievable. So, like, this is basically saying, look, level 18 full build, your soul lane lethality is your soul lane gray health is 35%, right? It starts at 10 instead of 25, and it scales 35 instead of 50. If you're still 1v1ing late game, there's no way it's anywhere near as good. But if you're in a duo lane, 35% plus 50% lethality. So, I mean, this is going to be in a data table, so it'll be out there. But yeah, let's look at it. Plus 50% lethality when 2 or more enemies are nearby, which means you're like almost 80% or something. So here we go. Here is Pyke, and this is solo lane Pyke's gray health before and after. This looks pretty bad. Yeah, you're getting a lot less regen. Now, again, Pyke still has a basic health regen on the kit, so that's still there somewhere. But the gray health version, the gray health regen, yeah, that's been cut really hard. Solo lane Pyke gets pretty screwed. As far as duo lane Pyke, first 7 levels before you buy a serrated Dirk, no problem. Like, this is objectively a buff to support Pyke. There's no way to really, debate this, at least for the laning phase, for the first 7 levels of support Pyke. Sometimes, sure, you're going to run around and go ward, and you're going to meet the Graves jungle who's going to hit, like, auto dash, auto Q on you, and you're going to lose 300 health, and you're not going to get as much back. That's going to happen some. Like, this will occur a couple times in the game. That said, in general, the incredibly higher regen available here in the first few levels is going to more than make up for that. And overall, I would consider it a buff for support Pyke. Additionally, here we have how much lethality you would need to make up the nerf. 60 lethality at level 1 for solo lane Pyke. Up to 160 at level 18. Not going to happen. Now again, solo lane Pyke in team fights gets this table. That is very relevant, but just by the way. In lane, it's never going to get there. Here is duo lane Pyke / Pyke in team fights. Again, first 7 levels is objectively stronger. And then, look, yes, theoretically at level 18, you would need 60 lethality to get all the way there. But, like, hey, what level 12 Pyke doesn't have a mythic item? I mean, realistically, like, the rough timer for a mythic, by the way, is around here, around level 10. That's for non-supports. Yeah, sure, bam, right, we're there. Second major item, yeah, that's about right. That's, like, it pretty much keeps up, right? It is sort of an early laning buff, and then, I would say generally positive in team fights from then on. Because, again, solo Pyke will still use this table in team fights, the nerf is not quite as big as you might think, but it's an objective buff to support Pike. I think it's still objectively a nerf, well, I think it's still going to be overall a nerf to mid lane or top lane Pike, and yeah, I think that's reasonable. Next up, Qiyana is getting AP ratios increased, whatever. It's not going to really matter. But more flat on hit damage to her W, which is when holding an element, my auto attacks deal more damage. And then also 0, 30, and 60 more damage on the R. I am always a fan of this kind of scaling. I really like when R just does 1x, 2x, 3x damage. I think that's really convenient scaling. I think it means if you're not doing well, but you're gaining levels, you can keep up in the game. I tend to be a really big fan of the damage scaling in this way. There are obviously going to be good reasons for exceptions out there, especially champions who maybe scale off attack damage really well or other, but I'm always a big fan of 1x, 2x, 3x. Either way, let's look at this. By the way, W is generally maxed last. I know there is a very small hope that maybe there's a consideration to max W second for a slightly different play style. I mean, getting 24 bonus damage on a hit is a lot. So I think it's a real thought, but let's look into Qiyana's damage. So here is the W on hit damage, counting her base AD, because again, you can't apply this without applying your auto attacks. But yeah, it would be a buff from 14 onwards, which is not a very big one. This is, I forget what this is for. I don't know what this is. Oh, this is using an AD ratio? What am I not? Alrighty. After pausing and investigating, I realized what happened here. There was a change list that had a move speed buff from the W that appears to be gone. So forget about this. That's what had happened. There was a move speed buff that doesn't exist anymore. I knew there was going to be something in this rundown that I was transcribing that wasn't correct. So there you go. I didn't rebuild this looking at the patch notes very recently, so there's a change out there that didn't matter. Either way, yeah, this is a very, very small change. Obviously, there's a chance you might choose to max W second, but that seems unlikely. But either way, onwards to the R buff, level 11 onwards. So we're noticing that like these buffs do not matter until level 11 and level 14. So it is a late game buff to Qiyana only. Which generally speaking, they're saying her power relies on early roams. This makes her good in very high MMR because people are good at using that roaming power. Qiyana isn't the champion who's had the problem of being like pro viable or OP and super high MMR, but really low win rate for most players. And so things like, look, your ult's always good, and you know maybe your bad skill orders are a bit better, or your late games is better overall, is generally speaking, I would call it a pretty big positive. So cool to see that. I'm a big fan overall. Looks pretty nice. So on we go. Next up, Rammus is overall doing a little bit too well. 15 health growth off, I feel like is gigantic. So yep, here he is below 2,000 max HP. Feels kind of bad. Obviously, yes, as a tank, he's going to build just, health himself. So, he's still going to be a big boy. One of the nice things, at least, is like Rammus looks tanky and he has a strong particle effect on his W. So even though his durability is much more into armor MR than it is into health, he at least sells that really well. So when you see like a smaller health bar on Rammus, he still looks tanky because of his particle effects, which obviously helps combat what I often dislike about deflated health values is the health bar is deceptive. Look at this champion. It's not very tanky. You know what he actually is. At least in Rammus's case, he sells his tankiness pretty well. And I also get why this is the nerf. Instead of like nerfing his armor or MR or whatever, it's like defensive ball curl is like the reason you play him. Like if you nerf his armor, you're nerfing the cool thing about Rammus. So I get nerfing his health instead. And like if you nerf his move speed or his taunt and stuff, it's like, yeah, all those things are like functional and useful. So I get why this has to be the nerf. I don't know if this nerf had to be this large. Like if he needed to lose 15 health growth, like it probably could have been only 10 or something, but I'm not like absurdly mad or anything by any means. It's just like, wow, this is a lot of health off. Yeah, it's going to be like 1.5, 2% or so win rate, I think, maybe even a bit higher. We'll see how it goes. But I mean, this is one where we can look at Rammus's win rate post patch and say, okay, how much do you really lose for a 15% or a 15 health growth? What's the win rate drop? And just like try to remember that down the line. Like that can be interesting. Next up is Rel. She is doing too well, so they're gonna nerf her. So 3 flat armor and 2 seconds on the W cooldown. Here is how 3 flat armor matters. Here is her physical damage durability as a result. Yep, still pretty high armor, still a pretty tanky champion, but about 2% durability down on physical. Also, technically, it's 2% regen down on physical as well for sort of similar reasons. Obviously, it doesn't care what level it is, but it's a 2-second cooldown on W increase as well. This is pretty minor. I don't expect pros to hop off of Rel as a result of this. Her win rate is a bit, like, she's doing a bit well in solo queue as far as I can tell, but not really absurd. Again, minor nerf. It'll left tap her down in solo queue if you were on the edge about playing, or maybe you switch over to Alistar or something. But yeah, she was overtaking pro play, so good nerf. Again, I don't think she's absurdly OP, just like a bit strong, and I think this is like totally reasonably sized. Samira is getting some health, or some stats thrown back into her kit since she's doing very, very poorly post-patch. Mostly unplayed post-nerf, so pretty big 0.7 attack damage growth. Nice flattened out scaling here. Nice round-numbered scaling on the Q, in increasing it towards the late game, make her more of a late game champion again, or kind of continuing on that side. Oh, I just didn't put Samira down. I happened to overwrite Samira. I feel bad about this. This is meaningful, is I guess all I can really say. I forgot to do this. I'm sorry. Sejuani! Hi, Sejuani. 5.25 becomes 6% max health on W2. Keep in mind, W1 has some max health damage as well. And both halves of W have flat damage. This buff is much smaller than it looks on paper. But here is the damage. You can see, yeah, it's about 3% more damage at all points in time. Worth noting, in fact, that the flat damage completely outstrips the percent health damage. As you can see, like level 1, 3% more damage. Level 9, 2% more damage. And this is accounting for health scaling. This is using like Sejuani's own health total, which is reasonably high, as the punching bag. But yeah, late game W does 400 damage. Pretty sweet. 11 more damage at max rank against, moderately high health targets, like tanks without items, or basically any level 18 marksman or mage. It's going to matter. I don't know how much health a monster has to have for this to get capped. Against the majority of targets, is going to deal full damage, and you're going to get your 2% bonus damage in your jungle clear on one of your abilities. Again, this is using W1 and W2 together. This is, the entire spell, doing 10% or 2% more damage. Small nominal buff. Cool. Okay, so somewhat of a reshape to Seraphine. They're trying to push Seraphine. And this has been kind of a long time coming. I feel like Riot didn't do enough to reinforce that Seraphine was a mid laner. She very quickly fell off being a mid laner, being like a hard support. And I guess Riot was like, screw it, supports are enjoying her, whatever. As long as winners are in line, I guess they're okay with it. But she's also really become the bot lane farm champion and the best one in the game. Like, bot Seraphine is absolutely busted, and like every single pro team should be playing Seraphine. Now, thankfully, last I looked at 11.4, Seraphine was the second most banned champion in the game behind Udyr. So at least teams are mostly aware that Seraphine is strong and they are banning her. But Seraphine should be 100% pick ban, not 80% pick ban. Like, that means at least 20% of teams are hard trolling in their drafts. That is a very large number of pro teams to be a hard trolling in their drafts. Seraphine should be in every game and usually end up as a bot laner. Anyway, let's move on. So doing a reshape to push Seraphine towards solo lane and away from duo. And to be clear, it's because she is super OP in duo. She is absurdly strong. She needs to be very, very nerfed. So what's happening here? Okay. Seraphine's notes no longer decay. So the more notes you get, let's say in like a big team fight or something, the more damage they deal. All right, but there's more going on. Notes from allies only deal 1/4 of the damage. So basically this means your notes deal full damage. When you're like casting a bunch of spells and autoing a champion, your notes deal full damage, which is like a very small buff. But the notes from allies are doing much, much worse. And, the expectation is that these together mean that dual lane notes do, much less damage. However, there's another change here, where instead of having the smooth linear scaling to note damage, it spikes at levels 1, 6, 11, and 16. Well, obviously it starts the same at 1, but then it doesn't level at all, it doesn't scale at all, until 8 at 6, and 14 at 11, and then 24 at 16. What's interesting is this scaling is obviously non-linear. It's plus 4 for 5 levels, then it's plus 6 for 5 levels, then it's plus 10 for 5 levels. Sure, there's more XP required to go here than to go here than to go here, but that scaling is still ramping pretty quickly. All right, so let's look at all this, because the old note scaling was linear. All right, we can see that at level 1, Samir's the same champion. It drops pretty hard at 5, then it gets back there at 6, and then it drops again 7 through 9. So really, pre-11, Seraphine does less damage. Like, it's equal at 1 and very briefly better at 6. But otherwise, realistically, Seraphine is nerfed in the early game and buffed 11+. Which means if you can spend more of your game 11+, you're more powerful. Guess who does that? Solo laners. So this is a nerf to support Seraphine, this is a nerf to dual lane Seraphine. Now, of note, it is a bit less of a nerf to dual lane Seraphine in pro play, because pro supports get out of lane a lot more and let the farm champion gain XP a lot more often. Unless you're doing Senna Tahm Kench, this is almost always true. Oftentimes you see like level 6 AD carry, level 7 mid lane, level 4 support. That's like a pretty common thing to see in a lot of cases. Okay. Unless you're going to spend a lot of your game time at level 2 ulti or higher, your passive got nerfed. Okay, wait, there's more going on. There's also an ulti nerf. The ulti nerf is just up by 20, then 10, then 0 seconds. So again, you're spending more of your game, 11+, where the nerf isn't as bad, and we can kind of remove the decimal here. This is a bigger nerf for you. So, okay. Great. Like, it's obviously these changes are nerfing any Seraphine who's sharing XP and, buffing or less nerfing a Seraphine who's in a solo lane, getting XP more often. Okay, cool. Now let's break down the rest of this math here. All right, this is selfish Seraphine. This is Seraphine getting 4 notes on herself, hitting a champion. I guess we have a green one right here that we should change color to. Okay, so indeed, now it's actually stronger at level 1 because you're not getting note fall off. Sure, okay. At 6, obviously, it's even stronger than before. So much so that it's still better at 7, which is nice. But, yep, still, 11+. Yep, stronger here. Okay, so still, even for solo lane Seraphine, this is weaker, right? Like, still for solo lane Seraphine, I would overall call this, for the first, 8 levels, I would call this weaker. Because hitting minions didn't matter anyway. It was going to be the same regardless. Hitting a champion, do I care that 15 became 16? Not really. I don't really care that 23 became 16, but it's still a nerf overall. And yeah, this was okay. Now, what about if I have max notes on absolutely everyone? I have 4 notes on me, and I have 4 points on all of my teammates. All right, we're absolutely everywhere. Well, FYI, you do 12.83 times the damage. There's a whole lot more decimals. The actual decimals are in the math here. I'm just giving you the rounded version verbally. Either way, ouch. In a world where you got 4 spells off and then auto-attacked, this is what you're losing. Now, keep in mind that if you get 1 spell off an auto attack, this is still kind of the same. Now, worth noting, this math changes around a little bit based on what's going on, right? So, let's say, for example, right, so this is getting 4 notes, right? So if I get 4 notes on me, 4 notes on you, and you, I do 12.8 times the damage, and so 4 becomes 51. Okay, cool. If it's me and some homies, I'm doing 8 times the damage. I'm doing 4x for me, and then 1, 1, 1, 1, right? Because it's 25% per person. So a 12.8 multiplier becomes an 8 multiplier. That's pretty bad. It gets worse. If I only have 3 notes, actually, let's make the easy one. Let's say I have 1 note per homie. I have 1 note on me and 1, 1, 1, 1. I'm doing 2 times the damage. I'm doing 2 times the damage, which is 8. If I have 1 note on me and 1 per homie, I'm doing 1 plus 0.95 plus 0.9 something plus 0.8 0.8 something plus 0.8 something. That adds up to way more than 2. So if you're like Q auto, W auto, E auto, this is an even bigger nerf to team fighting with Seraphine. This is overall a very large nerf to Seraphine note damage. So to be clear, this is actually the charitable version of teammate note damage. It is far worse. Now, there's more going on. I don't want to do like 17 different data tables. This is 4 teammates nearby, right? So like if it's me and one homie, instead of doing 1.95, I'm doing 1.25. Instead of like 4 times damage becomes 2 times damage, which is like even worse. But long story short, the more friends you have, the worse the ability is. That was obvious, but like, there you go. And I don't want to be clear again. Like, this is the total damage the notes dealt. And I could have even included total AD here, but there's already so much going on that I didn't include it, but I probably should have. This is the total damage of the notes in like extreme situations. So like, the sort of most extreme nerf possible is here, where like, okay, I'm in an entire team fight. I cast 4 spells. I have 5 people around me, and I did 56 less damage. Like, the most extreme part of the nerf, where I cast my entire kit and have my entire team around, is not really that absurd. It's not really that absurd. It matters, yeah. This is a nerf overall to the champion, which, again, she totally needs. Seraphine needs the nerf. I'm sorry, Fnatic, you have one less mid laner to play. But, yeah, weaker champ for sure. All right, Shaco's getting changes. The base damage, like on the AoE, and the single target damage on Jack in the Box are both going down by 5, or in this case 10, but the box now deals 10 to 50 bonus damage to monsters. This means Shaco is much worse in PvP in absolutely all cases. The damage is flat, doesn't matter if you max it or not, it's still that much less damage, but as a jungler, he is getting better. He is doing the same to more damage. Like against Gromp, it's the same damage. Against Wolves or Raptors, it's more. So Shaco is doing more damage to the jungle, and more damage if he's maxing W, aka AP Shaco in the jungle. So here you go. Here's PvP AoE, here's PvP single target. Here is jungle damage AoE versus single target. This is if you're maxing it last. But if you're maxing it first, here is AoE. Bam. Look at these big juicy damage increases. Look at how much faster AP Shaco clears the jungle. Gigantic increases here. This is the AP Shaco jungle buff. Obviously, support Shaco AP is getting a big nerf because they're really relying on the box damage. Overall, if you're playing AD Shaco in lane or something, it's not going to be as rough because you're not relying on the box. It's less percentage of your total damage, but still going to be felt. Yep, it's going to move that stuff around quite a bit. AP Shaco jungle should be pretty solid, though. Lower cooldown on Trundle Chomp. Cool beans. Shaco is getting an AP ratio nerf on the passive, but a duration and AD buff on the ult. Now, as far as I can tell, AD Twitch is fine. Looking at Plat plus solo queue win rates, looking at any of the AD mythics, whether you're going Shield Bow or going Gale Force or going Kraken Slayer, any of the 3 have higher than the baseline win rate at Plat plus. Now, this does, by definition, preclude games where Twitch doesn't make it to his mythic, and he gets completely lane stomped. That is some small percentage of games. 1% of games, you never get to mythic, you just lose too hard. You just surrender at 15. But there's Gale Force, which is the best option. There's Kraken Slayer, the medium option, and there's Shield Bow, the worst option. And all of the 3 have above baseline win rate. So AD Twitch doesn't actually seem to need the help. But they are nerfing AP Twitch, buffing AD Twitch, and really just buffing ult Twitch. I mean, even AP Twitch can use this, just doesn't use it as well because it's crit. But why is this out of order? I don't know. So here is 15 ability power per level. Okay, at 15 ability power per level, here is the total damage of Twitch poison. And you can see it's down 10%. And hey, 15 AP at level 18 is 270. Yeah, you probably have more than that by level 18, but like it's a decent representation of how much AP you have as Twitch. It's close enough to be like, yeah, okay, this is kind of how much you're losing. Is it exact? No. But like, are you going to get Nashus at about level 7? About that much? Yeah, well, that's 100 AP. So like, it lines up pretty well in a lot of cases. This is not a horrible like way of graphing this, to be really clear. Yeah, 15 to 270 ability power. This is what are we doing? Oh, this is Twitch's total attack damage, counting the ultimates. It's +5. Just flat up +5 attack damage. So here you go. Yep, throwing the ult a little bit stronger. Great, good for you, Twitch. The duration's obviously a pretty big deal, though. It's a big team fight winner. So I like that. AP rat is strong. AD rat feels wrong. Cool. Yeah. All right. So then we go into Udyr, where he's losing 7 health growth. He is getting half the nerf of Rammus, despite being probably just overall. Well, okay, that's not completely true. Here's health change. Another champion going down below 2,000 health. Just double checking something. I'm not an idiot. Losing 119 health. What am I getting wrong here? We're back. I know what I got wrong here. I typoed. I put 82 per level instead of 92 per level in my data table. So yeah, it's 7 health growth, which, you know, not gigantic. I mean, it matters. It affects his W shield. It's certainly relevant, but yeah, I mean, Udyr gets to run around having a big health pool. Rammus doesn't. I get sort of. I mean, it's weird, right? Because like, Rammus gets to be tanky because of his W, right? So there's a rationale for his base health being low because he's going to pop W and that's going to be fine. Udyr is kind of in the same boat, though, where his base health doesn't have to be super high because he can just press W and get a shield and make up for it to a certain degree. Now, yes, the W obviously scales off his health, but like, so too really does Rammus's armor MR bonus from his shell scale off his health, because what else is going to multiply? So I don't know. It is interesting to have like a fighter guy have way more health than an actual tank who literally taunts you. It's not the worst thing ever. Again, it's not a huge deal. It just, I don't know. It just always feels a little bit wrong sometimes. Either way, they have fully reverted the aura damage on Phoenix stance back down to 40 to 240. And I actually like this a lot, because if you wanted to play AP Udyr, you're using the on-hit Flame Gout a lot more, because you're building Lichbane and Nashor's Tooth and these kinds of things where you're like gonna auto attack a lot more. Whereas Tank Udyr is like, it's gonna hit R and hit you once, but he's just gonna stun and like sit in turtle stance and like, you know, be in the way. And so the aura damage is a much more meaningful part of Tank Udyr's damage than AP Udyr, who is going to use the on-hit damage a lot more. It's like a reliable part of the kit. It's really meaningful. So, you know, I dig that this is the change being made. Here's the overall damage. It is down fairly meaningfully. Overall, I would say this should be enough of a nerf to Phoenix Udyr that he is not a mandatory pick a ban in pro play anymore. He is basically a permanent first ban red side for most pro teams around the world. This champ is definitely busted. Nerfed in time for playoffs. I want to be clear, should still be viable. Tank Udyr, I think, should still be a viable champion. You don't go from being the most important champion in League of Legends to a, I mean, totally moderately, like, meaningful nerf. You're not going to be deleted off this nerf. If you want to play Phoenix Udyr, you absolutely still can. Viego gets some changes. No longer dodges turret shots that are in the air when he's possessing. No longer loses stacks and Magi's when picking up an enemy. But now gains Magi's and Dark Steel stacks of people he possesses. Great. Cool. Fixed a bug where he possesses soul from extreme ranges. That obviously is a bug. And yeah. So cool. Some fix there. Great. Cool beans. Yeah, bug fixes that added up to a slight nerf because he was getting possessions too easily and dodging turret shots. Yeah, and this is, I guess, less of a bug fix, but an intentional change, which is a good thing. It's a sort of Yumi tech of I'm untargetable, but I don't break projectiles. I'm a fan of that. All right, now we go into item changes. All right, so item changes. Riot trying to have Muramana and Essence Reaver live in different spaces because they do fairly similar things. They give raw AD, they give ability haste, you cast spells and auto attack, like they refund mana, like they're kind of the same item. So how can we make them a bit more different so you really choose one over the other? Okay, Well, for Muramana, we nerf the basic attack damage outright. And then we make the spell damage go from 2.5 to 2.7 for ranged champions, and 2.5 to 3.5 for melee champions. Also, abilities also deal total AD bonus damage against champs as well. Okay, huge buff to ability damage, substantial nerf to auto attack damage. Muramana is the one you buy when you are spell-based. Essence Reaver, being that it gives you a Sheen proc, and to be clear, no bonus spell damage, is the one you buy when you are auto attack based. I want to get more mana. I need some way to sustain my mana pool up. So Muramana is the but I'm a spellcaster version of that. And Essence Reaver is the but I'm an auto attack version of that. I like that a lot. It's really cool, right? They're both playing the infinite mana sort of mind space, but I need infinite mana, and I'm doing one or the other. Like the design work, I think it's really, really cool. So here is this. Okay, here is Jace's total AD plus the percent max mana on hit damage. Now, obviously, in the first few levels, this is not really possible. You could kind of functionally delete it because it's not realistic. But this is what is Jace's mana pool at this level. Fully stacked Muramana. All of the AD that goes into that, because Muramana gives flat AD and then mana to AD conversion, so that's in there as well. And then also the on-hit damage. What do we got here? We have this. We have a roughly 8% auto attack damage nerf. Sure, the more items you buy, like Eclipse or Yomu's or whatever, the more AD you get, the more, the sort of less this matters. But this is still, this is a meaningful drop to auto attack damage. Okay. However, and we use Jace because not only is he a tier user, but he goes ranged and melee. It's really convenient. So this is ranged then melee spell damage bonus. This is, in this case, I am not putting Shock Blast in. I know I could have. This is simply how much raw damage is coming through the Muramana. 2.5% becomes 2.7%, but also 6% raw AD. Again, we can probably delete the first few levels of this one. Oh, right. This carries over, so we kind of can't do this. We'll do that. That way actually, it doesn't really matter because, we can just do this. Okay. So, a pretty meaningful 30-ish%. Like, it provides, 30% more of what it's doing. Now, in the other one, it's providing 40% less, which in the real world is 8% less actual auto attack damage. But, okay, yeah, sure. Yep, the on-hit damage is 13 higher. The on-spell damage is 17 higher at level 18. For melee, it's much, much better, obviously. A solid, 30-ish damage to your spells every time. It's pretty good. And to be clear, the more attack damage you buy, the more this matters. When you get Eclipse and you get 50 more AD, you get 6% of that, which is, not a ton, but, 3-ish more damage on hit. It just kind of adds an AD ratio to all your abilities. It's a small one. It's, 0.06, but yeah, this is really cool. This feels like it's objectively buffed, but I guess maybe because keep in mind the auto attack damage was only ever. Wait a second. Okay, hold on. Basic attacks abilities deal max mana as bonus damage to champions. Basic attacks deal max mana as bonus damage. So theoretically, unless it's a typo, this works on non-champions, and I just have better auto attack wave clear. Melee abilities and ranged abilities deal 2.7% max mana as bonus damage. So this means everything works against minions. And then all abilities deal 6% bonus damage to champions. So, maybe I'm misreading this, or it's a typo, but they just buffed the hell out of Muramana by making all of it work against minions. And then making the bonus AD to champions, or the bonus AD on spells, champion only. I don't know if this is a typo or not, because I could really see it going either way. And I know there are players who play this on PvE and they know the answer. That's going to be in the comments down below. I will try to, like it so that it shows up at the top. Someone can answer that question for me. Either way, even if it's even if it's still all champion only, this is, I would say, an overall buff to Muramana. They're saying, by the way, things that are both, like Gangplank's Parlay and what's the other one? Like Ezreal's Mystic Shot and things like that. They will work as spells. Like they will take the bigger number here. They will take the 2.7 or the 3.5 instead of the 1.5. They will take the abilities deal 6% total AD extra damage on top as well. Adding 12 or 20 or something damage on top as well. So this looks like it's overall above 200 mana. It works against minions. This is absurd. And just getting wave clear is really powerful. So yeah, that's really good stuff. Okay, Stridebreaker now has more range, a bit more speed, but less slow and less damage. They're making Stridebreaker more of the dash item, less of the damage item, which I'll be honest, I actually really like quite a bit. Because it really helps you decide between this and other fighter mythics, because look, the reason you buy Stridebreaker is the dash mythic. Now, okay, sure, it does also live in a kind of similar place as Prowler's Claw. Prowler's Claw is also kind of the dash mythic, but it's the assassin dash mythic instead of the fighter dash mythic. It's kind of nice that everyone has mobility mythic, right? So tanks have Chem Tank, and enchanters have Shurelias. And let's see what else we got going on here. We've got Gale Force and Stridebreaker and Prowler's Claw. And I guess mages don't, but mages get to buy Zonias. So you know what? You guys are fine. You've got enough actives anyway. Oh no, they've got Rocket Belt, right? So every build, and I just now realized this, by the way, that every single class has a dash option, or at least a go fast option, if it's not a dash outright. And so kind of reinforcing that and being like, no, but really though, Stridebreaker is the dash option. Because, okay, Stridebreaker gives you a slow attached to it, whereas Rocket Belt gives move speed and Gale Force gives assassination and Prowler's Claw gives, damage amp and stuff. Stridebreaker is also kind of the worst of all the dashes. So I'm glad to see it be better at that. I will also say that I'm expecting this to be it's tough because of the slow getting worse, but it's also a decay, so it's not as strong as you think anyway. I know their goal is that it's power neutral. Yeah, I'm leaning power neutral or slight buff to Stridebreaker, because just getting on top of them as Garants that you can land your Q, that's the important part. Getting on top, getting in range so that you can land your flip as Urgot, that's the important part. Stridebreaker, yeah, I like its power going into the dash and letting fighters feel really powerful and getting an access to a low cooldown dash and going and being awesome. I'm a fan of this. This feels really great. So next up is Rageblade. Certain champions benefit too much from Rageblade because of the fact that its crit chance can skill over 100% and it ignores crit modifiers, so we're adding rules to circumvent that. Okay. Speaking of Senna, her passive no longer gives 100% crit chance. It's just converted into lifesteal automatically. Okay. That's cool beans. Great. But now we convert 1% crit chance into 2 bonus on hit damage with a maximum 100% crit chance. Sure. So you can never overcap if you were doing funky stuff. Okay. And the on-hit conversion is now affected by crit damage modifiers. Now, okay, this means, by the way, that theoretically, I didn't do the math. This might be a follow-up, or it's going to be something else on the line. Maybe I'll tweet it out. I'm not sure. Stay tuned. My Twitter is right down there. Infinity Edge may theoretically be an optimal buy now for a Rageblade build. I don't know for sure, but maybe. But here's a thing that I want to bring up. And I'm going to assume it works this way. I don't know for sure. All right. So this is something that I've I'm not sure if it's actually a real gripe or not. It's just, it works this way, and I'm not sure. Okay. So the way League of Legends actually codes your crit damage is it is a multiplier on your total AD. Okay. So your crit damage is 1.75. So, it's 1.75. Whatever. That's fine. The way that League of Legends handles non-standard crit damage is a multiplier off the 1.75. So, for example, if you wanted to give a champion 0 crit damage, crits do nothing for you, you just deal total AD, that number is not 0. That number is 4/7. So 56%. If you want your champion to literally not scale off crit, the number you put in is 56%. As far as I can tell, that's what's true about this. Which means a champion could gain nothing from crit and still gain 56% of the value of Ginsu's Rageblade. This is how Jhin works. This is how Yasuo works. This is how Senna works. Like, Yone the same, but like maybe there's someone else out there, whatever. As far as I can tell, that's how those champions are built. And as far as I can tell, that's how they interact with Rageblade. What that means is, hey, what would you prefer? 0 crit damage or 56% returns on crit damage turning into Rageblade? So Rageblade, even after this change, I believe, is still charitable for anyone who gets bad crit chance. Now, in the case of Yasuo and Yone, they could probably go back on the old changes now, because now they're getting this recompense regardless. But basically, and thing is, like, you didn't really want to go Rageblade Jhin anyway, because you didn't really want flat damage because your raw AD was really high. What this is going to do in the real world is going to make this consideration a bit more close, a bit closer for Rageblade. So, okay, so here is a Rageblade who magically has, a Senna who magically has exactly Rageblade. Double checking, looking over here. Yeah. This is Senna, who magically has just a Rageblade, and we're not doing it by level, we're doing it by soul count. Soul count obviously impacts her total attack damage, so that's part of the calculation. And obviously, at 160 souls, that's when you would hit 80% crit chance from souls, which means Rageblade puts you at 100%, which means, over here, pre-changes, not only is Senna getting more damage out of the Rageblade, but she's obviously still scaling souls. This is obviously, a bit of a pipe dream, but this is how much Rageblade damage, this is how much total auto attack damage Senna would get, counting her total AD, counting her passive giving some on-hit damage, counting Rageblade's on-hit as well. And yeah, up until 160 souls, it is, a 7 to 8% damage nerf, because that's actually how that works. That's the math as far as I can tell. Obviously, once you break this, Senna was getting a ton of damage over pre-patch, but instead is gaining lifesteal post-patch. It's obviously less damage, but I want to be really clear that this part of the calculation, this part of the data table, has lifesteal on top, whereas this did not. So there's some considerations here. Just hey, by the way. Actually, I'm not even certain about that because double checking. Yeah. Pretty sure. Anyway, let's move on. Ultimately, it is obviously a nerf to Rageblade Senna. It may still be correct, but yeah, her total damage is down 7% on just Rageblade. Next up, Serpent's Fang is getting a new change. For some reason, I did not do any calculations here. I apologize. So they're like, Serpent's Fang is powerful, but underwhelming. Now, this is true, by the way. Serpent's Fang is objectively a good choice in good Serpent's Fang's game. People are bad at remembering to buy Serpent's Fang. Now, here's one of the kind of weird things is, so what I was seeing online before reading these changes, before doing the math myself, which I haven't, is that this is in almost all cases an objective nerf to Serpent's Fang. Now, depending on how widespread that post has gone, we'll see one of two realities post-patch. Because it's easy to look at these changes and be like, they're making Serpent's Fang good. Maybe I'll build Serpent's Fang next patch. Even if it's really a nerf, seeing these changes will make players reconsider Serpent's Fang just by itself. And I'm going to guess that regardless of what's actually in this text, Serpent's Fang will still be strong in 11.5. So the fact that it's still going to be strong and people see it in the patch notes means people are more likely to consider Serpent's Fang in 11.5. Beyond that, let's look at the changes themselves. Make it more broadly usable. Imagine Grievous Wounds, but for shields. All right. Dealing damage to an enemy champion reduces any shields they gain by 50% if you're a melee champion and 25% if you're a ranged champion for the next 3 seconds. What that means is I can hit you early, and I've immediately stopped your shielding. So I auto-attack you, then Janna shields. It's already too late. So you have to pre-shield if you want to do it. Updated Shield Reaver. Way you damage champions who are unaffected by Shield Reaver, reduce shields on them by 50% or 20%. Okay. So, well, there you go. Doesn't matter the timing then, ultimately, because if it's after the fact, that's fine. So, yes, theoretically, if you were soloing a champion who is shielding themselves, they pop Locket or whatever, you getting 60 damage per auto attack as Ashe was a lot, or per volley. Now it's just like, well, you get 25 off and, that's it. So yeah, it is a 25-50% shields or grievous wounds. What is nice about this is you don't have to multi-hit, right? It's still lethality tied, so you still have to be an attack damage champion. But if you did a bunch of damage and then kind of got pushed off for some reason, and they shielded after they Janna ulted you away, you still got your 50% shield cut because you were Talon. So it is going to be harder to compare when they're better and not. In a pure single target DPS case, it's really easy. In a I'm helping my team deal damage, in a team fight case, it's way less cut and dry. I know the Reddit posts were like, look, it's a nerf in most cases. And if you are Talon fighting Karma, I'm sure it is. But that also depends on how much damage you're dealing. Because if you one-shot the shield... Anyway. Ultimately, you should build Serpent's Fang next patch. That's what it comes down to. You should build Serpent's Fang next patch. It's a good item if your opponents have 2 or more shielders that you interact with. Do that. Also, apparently there's a bug fix. Not that a lot of lethality users are used on hit items, but important to know. Maw of Malmortius is 300 gold cheaper. Now, I want to be clear about something. Maw still fights Shield Bow in terms of being a lifeline item. It also fights Sterix in being a lifeline item, but Sterix got nerfed. Shield Bow is, by no means mandatory. So what's going on here? Well, Maw was about gold division on pure stats, which is never exciting. But hey, you got 400 or more shielding, which is worth 1,000 gold of health, which is actually quite good. So, okay, it's, it really gave you 4,000, almost 4,100 gold of stats. So we could use the shield every time. So, yeah, pretty good. Now, it's gold division for stats. So, if you ever just happen to be in a spot where the shield wouldn't pop, because, the Talon was killing you in the end, even though there's a bunch of other magic damage in the team, it's gold division by itself. Yep, item looks pretty great. Next up is Black Cleaver. Also getting 200 gold cheaper. Getting 100 more health. You're removing one passive and adding a new one. Instead of getting the bonus physical damage when they are all the way shredded and getting some missing health damage on it, which is pretty hard to stack, you just simply get dealing physical damage to a champion, grabs move speed per stack of carves. So, old Black Cleaver was 80% efficient, but you could eventually shred a bunch of armor, and then, hey, if you're really happy, you could do percent missing health damage. So, not gold efficient stats, but, eventually you build up to a shred, which was, eventually decent, but, you could just buy a Sterix and then eventually buy Serolda's Grudge and just kind of be happier, right? Butcher was kind of hard to use. It was only active once you finally got all the attacks on. So now... Oh, I missed something. No, I don't need the number 6 there. Health goes from 300 to 400, so let's actually add that real quick. Yeah, so now it's basically gold efficient stats. Attack, damage, ability, haste, health. Okay. It's gold efficient stats with text you can absolutely use. This looks a lot better, right? It's still that same, up to 800 gold worth of armor shred, sure. But instead of gaining some missing health damage, which is hard to access, you're always going to get 5 to 30 move speed. So it's back to the old Black Cleaver that gave move speed on it. They tried the other passive. Turns out it wasn't going that well. So this looks to be in a lot better spot. It's not so absurdly expensive that you can't get to it. I mean, 3,100 seems reasonable for a fighter to buy, to be honest. 33 seems a bit high. I'll be honest here. But yeah, gold efficient stats. This is still a good passive, and this is now a easily used passive. This feels like a way better Black Cleaver. This item looks outstanding. Cool beans. I'm a fan. This is good stuff. Alrighty, in-game shop updates. The shop continued to assimilate knowledge at an alarming rate and has reached a new level of awareness. Good job. Great. Okay. Starter bundles. They're going to view now offer you the most popular combination of items players start with. It is the first item. Nice. So now you get Doran's Ring 2 potions or Dark Seal refillable or things like that. That's great. Like buying blue or red smite and then going over and buying the refillable is kind of annoying. I'm a big fan. This is cool stuff. There's a really good chance, by the way, that we're gonna get like red smite control ward for fiddlesticks and stuff like that, which is great. Like this is super cool. That's great. Font rendering has been improved. Congratulations. Additional bug fix and performance improvements. I don't know what this was, but that's okay. Shirley's Battle Song now filters correctly for ability power or mana and regen. Great, cool beans. Okay, yeah, I'm glad they're still doing this. Like, I'm glad there's still a team doing shop updates because these are pretty great. Some league client stuff. There's a bunch of champion bug fixes that I just refuse to ever read. Oh, okay, big one here is Samira R works with Ravenous Hydra. That's pretty nice. We got some B skins. That's cool stuff as well. Alrighty. Hour 10 minutes in. Patch 11.5 TLDR. Let's get into it. Azir, very big early game nerf. Gonna really hurt his trading. Gonna really hurt his pro play, especially I think, and high elo. Gragas gonna have really substantially higher costs in the early game for his Q. Should still be viable. Jax getting almost 1 full AD per level is going to mean a lot for his liking split pushing and letting him race down a base. Moderately helpful for PvP combat, of course, as well. Karma. Yeah, moderate buff 1 second off the Q. Kog'Maw gets functionally like an 8% DPS increase on no items. This eventually falls off as you build more, but yeah, AD Cog is going to really enjoy 1% more max health damage. Master Yi, Emax first, might just maybe be a thing. Either way, pretty good buff to mid to late game Master Yi. Pyke basically is absurdly weaker as far as regen in solo lanes, and definitively stronger in duos. Like, definitively, no argument, stronger champion in duo lanes. This nerf, even though it doesn't scale with level anymore, this scaling is enough to more than make up for it. It's going to be fine. As far as solo lane, you will never make this up. This will never keep up. Ever, it will never keep up with the nerf. But one thing to consider is it's not just, were you in mid lane, cool, you're screwed forever. As soon as you team fight, you get this. So the nerf is not as obvious to solo lane as you might think, because there's plenty of points in the game where you are roaming to bot lane, or the jungler ganks you, or any other number of things where there's more than one opponent around. Definitely makes him a weaker laner for sure. It is a nerf, there's no question of that. But, yeah, maybe not quite as absurd as it might look. Kiana usually maxes W last, but gets some more on-hit damage with it, and gets some more damage on the ultimate. So level 11 and later, Kiana's a bit stronger. Not going to be a big deal. Not going to be a big win rate bump, but cool to see the buff all the same. Rammus was 15 health growth. That is a really big deal. Rammus is no longer... I probably just don't rush Rammus anymore. I mean, he was really good, but now it's kind of whatever. Rel loses 3 armor and 2 seconds off her W cooldown. Moderate nerf, obviously. Will be felt. Viable. Samira gets some pretty solid 0.7 attack damage growth and 0 to 10% total AD ratio on the Q. Small buff. Should still be under 50%. That's okay for now. Sejuani gets a bit more damage on W2. The ultimately, sort of, the total W damage as a result of this is like 2% damage increase. It's pretty small. There's a lot of other damage in this ability, so this is a pretty small buff. Seraphine, the notes no longer decay against champions. But now they only deal 20% damage from allies. So really substantial damage cut to Seraphine playing with teammates. However, it no longer decays by herself, and the damage is, generally speaking, weaker until level 11, where it's then always stronger. So levels 2 through 10 Seraphine is just objectively weaker in basically all cases, with no exceptions. And Seraphine in a team fight is objectively weaker in all cases, no exceptions. But Seraphine by herself at levels 1, 6, and 11 plus is stronger. Those are really rare spots to be. So they are overall Seraphine nerfs, but the nerfs are definitely bigger in duo lanes than in solo. Which, by the way, to be fair, Seraphine needs nerfs, so good job, Riot. Encore, another cooldown nerf as well that's going to mostly affect, it's going to more heavily affect Seraphines who aren't getting solo XP. So, Good choices. Good nerfs to Seraphine. Good job. These notes, by the way, I want to point out the one last thing though. These nerfs are not gigantic. Like the passive, like stage presence is not such a gigantic part of her kit that it's uber important. The ult cooldown you will really feel, but like even though this is a really big nerf, it's not that big of a deal. It's because it's not where all of her damage is. It's everywhere else. Shaco getting nerfed everywhere except for jungle. If you're going to max boxes first because you're going to play AP jungle Shaco, this is a really big deal because you're losing a flat 5 or flat 10 damage and getting a 10 to 50 back. You're going to shred through the jungle, but your PvP damage is always lower with Shaco. Trundle, a little bit shorter Q cooldown. Sounds good. It's a jungle clear speed increase. It's a top lane dueling increase. Good buff. Any buff that is Trundle is a better fighter is a good buff. You know, buffing W attack speed and Q cooldown, all that stuff is great. Twitch AP ratio is down. This ultimately ends up being about a 10% damage nerf to the passive by like mid to late game. The R pretty substantially stronger. 80 Twitch is already pretty good. So yeah, 80 Twitch is going to be very strong next patch. And 80 Twitch is going to be okay. I mean, still be totally viable. Udyr loses 7 health growth and some aura damage off the R. Still going to be very strong. Viego no longer dodges turret shots and can no longer do wonky things with possessions by getting them out of range or too fast. So good stuff there. Muramana, I don't know if it's a typo or not, but the way this is worded here, it means that Muramana works against minions now. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's what it's saying. Could well be, you know, a typo, or it could be I'm missing something. Either way. Yeah, because they don't even mention the fact that they want Muramana to work on minions now, but maybe they do because it's, you know, whatever. Either way, the TLDR is Muramana does way less basic attack damage and way more spell damage. And they also make sure that things that would do both count as spells. So, you know, Mystic Shot, Parlay, things like that. I would say overall, this is a buff to the item, but especially if you are much more of a spellcaster. You know, if you are Ezreal and you are not landing poke and you're just autoing, then yeah, maybe you're really just an Ezreal user, but overall, again, buff to Muramana. Stridebreaker, more dash, slightly faster dash, less low, less damage. I think this is probably about power neutral, but I'm a fan of this kind of change. Rageblade, her Senna no longer gives her a 100% crit chance, so it doesn't turn Rageblade into absurdity, but it does turn excess crit into lifesteal, as it's supposed to. Anyway, Wrath now does not work at a 100% crit chance. Also, the on-hit damage conversion is affected by crit damage modifiers, which means, again, Infinity Edge is a possibility, which maybe is good, maybe is not. I'm not certain yet. But it also means that champions like Senna or Yasuo or Yone or Jhin are getting a lot less value out of it. Based on my knowledge of how League works, though, Rageblade is still a favorable equation compared to just critting normally. The explanation is not worth going into in a TLDR. The TLDR is that it's correct. Rageblade is probably still correct in a lot of these cases. Serpent's Fang is now just a Grievous Wounds. Whether you apply it before the shield or after, it's the same thing. 50% for melee, 25% for ranged. Basically, it makes it a little bit supportive, where you just kind of apply it for the squad. I really wouldn't have hated a 40-60 because it's the exact same as Grievous Wounds is now. And I wouldn't hate to see more Serpent's Fangs open up to, you know, more types of champions. You know, this kind of thing going in more places than lethality, because it's still, you're like, well, they're a shield comp, so we're getting Zed. You know, I'm not sure about that one, but also keep in mind, like, it's not hard to buy this on like Ashe or Jinx and just being like, look, I'm just going to remove the shields. Like we're getting there. That's not unrealistic either. Ma is 300 gold cheaper, which is a really big deal. Black Cleaver is 200 gold cheaper, plus another like 260 gold worth of health. So this right here is a 567 gold swing. No. Yes? No. 467 gold swing. That is a really big deal. That is a very, very, very big deal. Also, instead of doing missing health damage when your opponent is fully shredded, you just get some move speed even at partial shred. That is, I would argue, a buff overall because of the usability, and this is obviously a gigantic buff. Black Cleaver is back, is the TLDR here. Item shop now has starter bundles, which is great, so you can buy your Doran's Blade plus potion all at once. Cool beans. That's the TLDR. Thank you for watching. I appreciate y'all for being part of this one. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.